The last couple visits to the big house have not gone the way Ryan Day wanted. Maybe the third time is the charm. I know I said it wasn't going to be a Three Thoughts Thursday. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Welcome to the beat. It's ingrained in me. I've got to do it. Maybe you'd be disappointed. I know Birm would be if I didn't at least try.
I would be.
So welcome to a mailbag version. I don't know. Mailbag version?
It's not really a mailbag because it's shared thoughts. It's their thoughts Thursday, and it certainly will opine on them. But I think that the people who are participating in this particular version of this episode would be offended if you didn't come up with a terrible three.
Terrible? Sometimes you smile.
Sometimes I do. Today's not great because technically Ryan Day has won in Ann Arbor.
I didn't say he'd never won there.
I know, but I want people to remember that he has won in Ann Arbor before. His one win in this series is in Ann Arbor.
Yeah, the last couple, not so great. Good chance that the Buckeyes can change that on Saturday. We'll see. They are 10-point favorites, 10.5-point favorites with a couple days to go as we stand here on Thanksgiving. The mailbag is overflowing. By the way, he's Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. It is the beat. It is Thursday of game week. Fired up for it. I don't know how many we'll get to, as many as we possibly can. But thank you to everyone who has been emailing in at the Austin Birm Show at gmail.com. It's nice to know. Some of you didn't even have mailbag questions. You just wanted to say thanks and wish us a happy Thanksgiving, and we appreciate that. Right back at you. Hope you have a fantastic Thursday and an even better Saturday. Cody Oaks wrote in to get it started, Birm, and we got, I'd say, maybe 10 questions about what role Lincoln Keenholz could play in this. So this was more about like the way that the transfer portal was going to work that Cody asked, but we can incorporate it into a lot of other questions that people had about how much Lincoln Keenholz could play. The first part of that question was if Lincoln would need to transfer before the season was over and if Tavian would need to be the backup. I don't think that the most direct answer to that is no. Because we just saw that with Devin Brown throughout the playoff a year ago. But then that transitioned to questions about, snow and bad weather for Julian Sayin and the run game package, quarterback run game package we've seen with Lincoln. Like, is there maybe a willingness beyond just putting it on film the last couple of weeks to actually use Lincoln in the big house on Saturday?
I mean, I think there has to be. I don't know what reason you would have to put it on film if you weren't intending to put him out there in some role on Saturday. The question is how much. The question is how much are you going to do out of that package? How much throwing are you going to let him do? I think anybody who's watched Lincoln, he was 1 of 3 last week against Rutgers, so wasn't as efficient throwing the ball as he was against UCLA in his one drive that night. But this is a guy that can make an impact. And so you just have to find a way to use the athleticism. I think that the one thing you don't want to do is put him out there and then only run him. Because if you do that, then you know what's coming. And, honestly, maybe that's okay in this game. We saw in the last couple of years, Michigan would bring in Alex Orji, and he was going to run, and yet he still found
to
get 20 or 22 yards a pop. So Lincoln may not be that level of athlete, but he is a guy that's willing to be physical. He's a guy that's willing to deliver some contact as well as take it. Again, I don't think that Ryan Day is putting as much of Lincoln Keenholz out there as they did last week without this being the reason why. So is that weather dependent? I don't think so. I think it's more red zone dependent, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because Ohio State wants to try to find a way to neutralize the numbers disadvantage in the red zone. And so that's where Lincoln is going to be best suited. And again, I think you have to be encouraged by the way he's throwing the ball, knowing that if you have Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate back in the red zone, then you add another element to things that maybe they otherwise haven't had.
Yeah, and I think this plays into another question that I got from Luann here, who, she wrote in, I think it was the first time, that she's from Maryland. She said, and she first of all wanted to say that she shares your nerves, Birm.
As any good red-blooded Ohio State fan should.
She shares Birm's nerves as a 1971 graduate of the Ohio State University, and she lived the war. Grateful for what we do, she said, in our work. And she said it because she parlayed that into if the weather turns ugly, could we see more reps from the South Dakota boy, Lincoln Keenholz? And I think, the answer to that very well could be yes, but the notion that Julian Sayin, that's where I'm sort of getting tripped up. Like that Julian Sayin can't handle the weather. Every challenge that has been thrown his way so far, he has passed it with flying colors. We mentioned that in the UCLA game, it started to rain a little bit. It certainly wasn't what the forecast is suggesting maybe for Saturday around noon in Ann Arbor. But, we had some of the same questions about C.J. Stroud before his first start in that game. And even with the flu, he threw for almost 400 yards in that game, and it certainly wasn't the reason that they came up short on that 2021 visit up there. But if Ohio State has its full array of weapons, and we're going to find out in 2 days if that's the case, we continue to believe that Jeremiah Smith is as close to a lock as he can be at this point to play. Carnell Tate, not going to make a definitive prediction one way or the other, even if it's trending in the right direction. But the belief that if it starts to get really ugly, that would only impact Ohio State, I think that's a little bit off base, because Bryce Underwood and Michigan are going to be dealing with the same thing, plus Matt Patricia's defense. But either way, despite the memory that we both have of the day before the spring game, it's not as if Julian Sayin hasn't had to practice in any poor condition, any cold days. The Buckeyes have done that throughout fall. Does that mean that you're absolutely prepared for all of the pressure that you're going to face when you get out there on Saturday? There's no guarantee, but I think Julian Sayin has earned the benefit of the doubt. If it turns into a game where no one can throw whatsoever, yeah, maybe that would favor Lincoln Keenholz and some opportunity to do that. But there's also a reality that Julian Sayin can do more with his legs than he's been asked to at this point.
Yeah, and the simple truth is this. Julian Sayin's a Heisman Trophy favorite, up there with obviously a couple of the guys, Jeremiah Love and Fernando Mendoza, but until he proves on Saturday he can't handle the elements, then you don't just take him off the field. He is the guy that gives you the best chance to win. That's why he's your starting quarterback. Regardless of that, I think that there's a role for Lincoln Keenholz, and the size of that role is going to depend on how well Julian handles what happens and how the forecast shifts. But Julian's going to be the guy out there leading the Buckeyes.
Yeah. I'm going to laugh here. I'm not going in any order. I haven't read these yet, so that's a live reaction to Justin asking a couple of random questions. Austin, how does it compare being a guest at Birm's house to usually being the host? It's unusual. It's backwards.
Yeah.
You can answer that. We try to do our best to make you feel at home.
Our houses are chaotic for different reasons. I have 3 dogs. He has an 8-year-old.
Yeah.
So there is a different level of chaos. Mine just ends up with more fur on you when you leave.
A lot more.
Yeah, but
compared to none. I don't.
That's what I mean. I have a husky and an Australian cattle dog. They shed like crazy. So it's a little different. We don't do it very often. It's once every other year that you've ever had to even consider staying at the Birm abode. But my wife is an excellent homemaker. And she prepares things.
I've had some delightful breakfast sandwiches there to fuel up for the uncomfortable ride to the big house with you and your jangle of nerves. Mm-hmm. I guess it's been 4 years ago, had a great card rip session thanks to Card Collector 2 and a Black Friday special. So that was awesome. Couple good breweries nearby to your house.
Toledo's in Lambertville are expanding the brewery scene. There's some good stuff going on down the road. Pavlov's, excellent little brewery. Local place is always good. It's the night after Thanksgiving. There's going to be football on. We may have TV's Adam King over for a bit on Friday night. Who knows? Anything's possible. We're just going to try to enjoy it, because the reality is we got to be on the road by like 7 o'clock on Saturday morning. So there's not a whole lot of time for tomfoolery or shenanigans anyway.
You got to have a little bit of shenanigans.
Yeah.
And he had an actual football. He had a Lincoln Keenholz package as well. I'm going to get to the second part of it in a second, because we got multiple questions about putting stuff on film. And then he wanted to know about, after the lateral on the punt return against Minnesota, Lorenzo Styles punt return touchdown against UCLA, any thoughts on another special teams surprise in the big house?
Well, there was a failed lateral last weekend.
Say I don't want to see it, because the latest one that they pulled out of the bag against Rutgers did not work. I applaud the effort. They are certain the progress has been there on special teams, and we alluded to this, I believe, on the modified Wednesday stock watch, that every time there's been a step forward or 2 steps forward or even 3 steps forward, there's 1 or 2 steps back. And last week, so I do think that the special teams are basically even on Saturday. We'll see if that happens or not. But that's been through progress of Ohio State and regression for Michigan. But even if you look at the good things, and you're 2 weeks removed from Lorenzo Styles taking a kickoff back to the house, you've been pretty consistent lately. We double checked. We were asked about it at Letterman Row about where Jaden Fielding ranks all time in Ohio State field goal percentage. He's 4th.
Yeah.
Obviously 2 high profile misses in the game that are always going to be in the back of your mind from what happened a year ago. he's not missed since the Wisconsin game, I believe. So, you see this progress, and then you have the botched gimmick kickoff return. Last week, you also, Brandon Ennis lets a punt bounce that cost them, 20, 30 yards of field position. So every time you start to feel like they're really barreling forward and they're about to make it a weapon, they undo it just a little bit.
Yeah, but it's little things, because even that botched return against Rutgers was because Brandon Ennis didn't catch the ball.
Yeah.
He let it bounce and then picked it up and then threw it, which was a choice. So, I think
not a good one.
No, I mean, there's terms in football, like, if the ball's on the ground, fire or whatever. At that point, what you were planning to do before, poison, fire, call it whatever you want. At that point, I think the original play goes out the window. I don't think you pick it up and then immediately just turn around and throw it when the ball hits the turf. So there's little things that are still being worked on. But again, the impression that Nate Ebner has made on the Ohio State special teams is pretty obvious, I think. And you're seeing that come to fruition. And now, this is one of the greatest special teams players in the history of the NFL, now having a voice and working alongside Rob Keyes and Gunnar Daniel. So you're starting to see some signs of life there. But again, I don't know that you want to have to do that in this type of game. I think it's always been interesting to me watching Ohio State and Michigan play. Michigan always has something up their sleeve, some sort of trick play, some sort of flea flicker, misdirection, reverse double screens, whatever. And Ohio State has traditionally just went out there and said, we're going to play our game and not really get caught up in the gimmicky stuff. I think that's generally good, but at the same time, you have to pull out every stop to win this game. So if you have an opportunity in this game to do something like that, sure, take the shot. But I don't think it should happen in the way it did on Saturday when you have, who was back there with Brandon Ennis in that moment? It was
James Peoples.
James Peoples, who has not returned a kick all year for Ohio State. So it was just a lot of weirdness, we'll see. I hope you don't need to do it. That's all I'm saying.
Unless I'm mistaken, that meant that James Peoples had to recover 2 fumbles on Saturday for Ohio State. So, we have this debate a lot about, should Ohio State do more creative things? Do they need to expand the arsenal? Should Ryan Day, Brian Hartline, or Chip Kelly before that, or anybody else be more willing to do fun, Statue of Liberty, crazy stuff to score points and have fun playing college football? And their approach has always been, if you have the better players, you don't need to do that. And sometimes it's icing on a cake. It's throwing a bone to a particular player on your team. I know that it's a give and take. And Ohio State's mentality for this game is that they can win without resorting to that stuff. Yeah. But, even if we're saying that it's talent equated, the other side has tended to be, at least since I've been covering the team, and I know that that's not necessarily true for the Tressel era before that, but which side has been more willing to take chances and get exotic? It's been the Wolverines, and it hasn't always worked for them, but recently it has.
Well, in the Tressel years, it was antithetical to everything he was throughout the year. So it's like when Ohio State under Jim Tressel would go into that game, they would do all kinds of things they'd never done before. And it wasn't on tape. It wasn't this same situation where Ohio State now you think, okay, well, they're putting this on tape to make Michigan think about that. Jim Tressel just was like, well, we're going to do things we don't do. And so it catches them off guard. I think most Buckeyes fans will look back and think about the Ted Ginn lining up at tight end in the 2007 game or the 2006 game, and the fullback, the fake handoff to Chris Wells, and then you have Ted Ginn running against a bunch of linebackers and stuff like that. You're like, oh, that's tricky. Bottom line is that Beanie, Chris Wells. It's just one of those situations where you don't have to do it, but if you do it, it better work. And I talked about it earlier this week, wrote about it at Letterman Row, but when you're Ohio State and you have this passing offense, it is the most efficient passing offense in college football. It's probably, despite not being as explosive as we've come to see Ohio State in the last 5-6 years, it's probably the most efficient passing offense Ryan Day's ever had. So when you take the ball out of Julian Sain's hands and you take it out of having a direct route to Jeremiah Smith or Carnell Tate or Max Clare or whatever, you're doing yourself a disservice. So I understand the desire for trick plays and doing things that are out of character. But if it takes the ball and costs you a down, I don't think it's worth doing when just doing the basic stuff they do so well.
Yeah, you mentioned, just doing things that aren't on film versus the balance of putting it on film, as we alluded to with Lincoln Keenholz. So that was, Justin asked that as well as BD here, which is what is the line between putting something on tape so defenses have to prepare for it versus holding things back so teams haven't seen it on film. I hear both arguments for what Ohio State does and doesn't do on game day. I tend to think that that's actually what happened with Lincoln Keenholz a week ago, is the mere threat, because what did they do last week? They put him in different situations. It wasn't in the red zone. They let him throw when we just assumed he would go in there and run quarterback power or other things. He's rolling out. Got bailed out on that first one with a roughing the passer call.
Lincoln rolling to his left may not be the
I don't know
scenario.
that was the smart call, but again, to me, everything that they did with Lincoln felt designed. Now, there's two benefits. He is still an inexperienced backup, and they are trying to play 5 games after this. So I understand that they want to continue to develop him. They want to give him chances to throw. And if you can accomplish another goal at the same time, which is, I do think there will be some opportunity, whether it's a 4th down, whether it's a 3rd and 1, whether that's in the red zone. I think we're going to see Lincoln Keenholz on Saturday. I don't know that, but I don't think that you need to, unless Mother Nature drops 35 inches of snow out there, that you have to go abandon everything with Julian saying that you've built at this point. So I'm not suggesting 2 quarterback rotation or putting him out in the middle of drives the way we may have to finish a drive.
Yeah.
But if and when he does get in the game, Michigan has to think, he has thrown 6 times in the last 2 weeks. They trust him to do that. We got to be on alert for everything.
Well, he's a quarterback. He's not a running back playing quarterback. He's not
Alex Orji.
He's not Alex Orji. So this is not a wild Lincoln package. This is a quarterback going in who has a different skill set. But again, as we've talked about, it's not like it's that different than Julian Sands. So the thing is, Ryan Day has scoffed at the idea of putting stuff on tape like in the past, but clearly that seems to be what they continue to do because, again, the timing of Lincoln's opportunities last week against Rutgers felt different.
Yeah, and I think is there an easy way to answer that question? How much should you hold back? How much should you put on film? What's the benefit to doing either one? It's the art of coaching. I'm channeling Ryan Day a little bit with that answer, but there's no definitive right way to do that. And it has not been as if the last 3 weeks have, with Lincoln, we can see and say that was something that Michigan has to think about. Yeah. But I think over the last 3 weeks as a whole, there's way more stuff that's been left in reserve that is not on film that can be unleashed. And that includes the personnel, by the way. Yeah. We saw last week Ohio State putting James Peoples on the field at the same time as C.J. Donaldson and putting out multiple running backs. Now, that may have been a requirement because you didn't have all your receivers, but there's things that Ohio State continues to do package-wise, personnel-wise, that you're like, oh, that's different. That's not what we've seen before. So this is actually an unusual game because Michigan doesn't have that alternative player that they've been putting in the games in the last few years. You didn't have Alex Orji, who you could replace for J.J. McCarthy in certain situations. Well, they can only afford one quarterback.
Right. Well, when you're paying $13 million, that's the way the cookie crumbles. But Bryce Underwood's it's all going to be on his shoulders, so it'll be a different philosophy for them.
Sam writes in and he says, Happy Thanksgiving. I'm going to skip to the end. He also says 42-6 Ohio State. So he is feeling confident, and you'll see why right here. Ryan Day seems to have the right mentality to win the game this year. Last year was reference to war. There were also references to like some of the worst things that ever happened to him in his entire life. This year is reference to kicking ass. Love it. I also love the Fast and Furious Nitrous shout out. Having access to the Woody throughout this week is new based on chatting with players and coaches throughout this week. Are you feeling their vibes mirroring Days? Any difference from previous years? I would say very different from previous years. Now there's still a couple days to go, and the pressure and the reality and the stakes are all going to sink in as you get closer to it. But this team, the confidence that you're seeing and feeling on a Tuesday or Wednesday morning, I talked to some people over there. It is very different, far less uptight, which is the word I would use from previous years.
Yeah, this year's team is different than last year's team. Yeah, a lot of these guys were on the team last year, but when you think about the fundamental leadership, the core of this team, it is, and this is not meant to be a knock on Jack Sawyer or anybody else who was involved in the last couple of years, but these are like robots. These are like football robots. Arvell Reese, Sonny Styles, Caleb Downs, these are like football robots. They're not coming into this game, I don't think, obsessing about what happens if we lose? What happens if we lose? I was talking with Television's Adam King on Tuesday, and we were reminding each other about the 2023 game up in Ann Arbor and Kyle McCord's pregame message to the team, which was, don't bleep this up.
Don't make mistakes.
That was the first thing. And I think that there's a mentality that has gone away at Ohio State, which is they're going to go out there, they're going to do their job, they're going to play football. If you make a mistake, you fix it. If you let your teammates down on one play, go get it the next one. Don't let it become a thing that drives you and that works against you. And that's what we've seen a number of times this year with Edric Houston. So like there are people on this team that are still developing that sort of football robot mentality, but the leadership of this group, the players, and I'm not even talking about Ryan Day and the changes inside of the Woody and the things that they're doing differently and letting players and do podcasts and letting us be in the building on Wednesday nights, et cetera. I think it's just about these guys. I think it's Sonny Styles. It is Caleb Downs. It is a cold, emotionless, logical group that says, if this, then that. If this, then that. And this is not the same group as they had a year ago. And I think that ultimately will be the difference on Saturday. That's why I think Ohio State will win this game, because I think that these guys are not going to allow themselves to be goaded into things.
There's some that will.
There's some that will.
And
that's on offense, I think.
Yeah, it would be surprising if Phillip Daniels was able to avoid a penalty. Now, bold predictions are Friday. He's going to mix it up. I don't think there's any question about that. Jeremiah Smith is not shy about getting involved with that. Now, I think that's generally thrust upon him from others who are trying to prove how tough they are and they want to rattle him and they know they can't beat him straight up. He's going to have to control that. We talk about that all the time, and it's strange that we have to do that a little bit to me, because I know that Jermaine Matthews is going to talk trash. I know that Phillip Daniels is going to play to the second echo of the whistle. I know that IGB is going to get into somebody's head, and out of that group and maybe one or two others, I would fully expect there to be a penalty. We always talk about it with like Ohio State has to keep its cool. And why is that? It's because the opponent in this game, I've never gone into it thinking that Jermaine's going to do something like on purpose to cost Ohio State. Whether that's G. Scott from a couple years ago, Cam Brown. This happens to Ohio State because the other team is so willing to push the envelope. And I don't just mean with illegal scouting operations or anything else that they want to cook up and conjure up. Since almost the first time I started covering this game, it's taking off shoes, it's twisting ankles, it's 3 or 4 guys standing over someone on the sideline. I don't think
it's shooting arrows across the field at the opposing head coach. It comes from the top, and
it does come from the top, and it always has been. And that part of it for me, and maybe they would say the same thing up north about Ohio State, but I don't
know. You go back to 2013 and the Dontre Wilson kick return, and you're like, oh, what is like? You have 8 guys who are standing over him trying to like.
But that's what I'm trying to be as objective about this particular part of it as I can be. Yeah. And I have watched it happen almost without fail every year, coming from the other sideline to Ohio State. And what do we talk about on Mondays a lot? Wild card and shankability. You have to have some element of that in you, but I wouldn't want to watch Ohio State habitually line step the way Michigan does every year. I think, frankly, it's disgusting, and I don't know why it continues the way it does.
Well, that's why you have one tunnel. Can't wait. Can't wait for the tunnel.
I
love the tunnel.
So it's time for a war zone.
Yeah, I don't like the tunnel.
That's the worst. Anyway, I got off on a tangent. I was channeling you.
I think what's interesting is a guy like Phillip Daniels, who's a transfer. He's never played against Michigan as an Ohio State Buckeye, but he's from Cincinnati. Like, he does not. You hear Jeremiah Smith. If you listen to the Caleb Downs podcast with Jeremiah Smith this week, Jeremiah talking about when he started to hate Michigan and why he hates them. And so Saturday's Jeremiah's birthday, by the way. So let's see how that plays out for him, and if he gets a little birthday treat for those guys up north. But the fact is, Ohio State will do everything they can to play emotional on Saturday because this game demands that. But again, I don't think that the guys who are in the leadership of the defense specifically are going to allow themselves to keep Michigan on the field by doing dumb things. Now, I'm not saying the offense may not have a guy or two, maybe Brandon Ennis, maybe Philip Daniels. Luke Montgomery is certainly not a fan of those guys up north. I think that there's a possibility you might catch one on offense. I would be shocked if it happens on defense.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Now, pregame, that's a different story. Yeah. That's all bets are off. Eric writes in listening to as much coverage of the game as possible this week, everyone is still dumbfounded by what took place in the shoe last year. Yeah, yep. I am. Why do Chip Kelly and Brian Hartline seem to get a pass for the abysmal game plan on offense last year? I know the buck stops with Ryan Day, but we've heard about his triumph in moving to the CEO role, but he still takes the bullet for the offensive coordinators while Jim Knowles gets the credit for the defense. I feel like Ryan Day has come in for a pretty large amount of scrutiny on that. Again, because as you said, as the buck stops there, I think we can expand that if we want to Chip Kelly for a year ago. And I think at the time we did, because he was supposed to revolutionize and expand the rushing attack, and that didn't happen. I think there's
until after that game.
Yeah, the reason I feel like it is more tied a year ago, directly tied to Ryan Day, is that I felt like they were trying to win that game. Like they were content to win 16-13. That it was almost like this year's blueprint of methodical pace of play and doing whatever it takes to win, and then still saving some ammunition for the playoff. Even with all the conversation of too tough and run it between the tackles and run it at their defensive tackles, I don't really think that was the case. And then I think they got, complicated with a curveball to Will Howard, and they didn't have a solution that they trusted. And so was the game plan confusing, befuddling on offense? Absolutely not. We can't go back and revise history in that way. Yeah. But there are things that happened in that game, including like everyone talks about the draw play that was just, if one block is made, it goes down as a touchdown. Again, that's trying to revise history. As I said, I just wouldn't do that. But it was bad. But I don't know that the preparation from the rest of the staff was porous. I think that the overall goal of that game was misguided.
Well, there's two things. There's an assumption that Ryan Day took over play calling and game planning that week. I don't know if that's true. I know that there's people who believe that steadfastly. I know there's others who will say that wasn't the case. Yeah. I think the other thing is that if you rewatch last year's game and you think about how different the game plan was after Will Howard was clearly compromised versus how it looked before. You got to remember early in that game, the Buckeyes were throwing it all over the yard.
Right.
And on the drive that Will Howard got hurt, they were throwing it. They were inside of the 25-yard line, and he got, should have been a targeting call. Obviously, it didn't happen either. So there's just, I think the game plan shifted. And I don't think that the mindset going into the game was, let's get out of here with the 16-13 win. I think the mindset was, let's attack.
Then it became,
let's get out of here with the 16-13 win, because they did not trust Devin Brown to run the offense. And so they decided to put a Will Howard who, even if he was cleared by medical staff, was not 100%. So he was foggy at the very least. So I think it changed into that. And you started at that point, because of the defense and how it had been playing, you figure all we have to do is make 2 field goals and we win.
Yeah.
And you miss 2 35-yard field goals and you lose. I don't think the game plan, I really do think it just changed because Will's injury put them in a position where they couldn't trust the backup quarterback, which is, again, going back to the conversation we had on Three Thoughts Thursday 2 weeks ago about Lincoln Keenholz. You never know in this game. There's a lot of dirty crap that happens in this game.
Sure,
and so you need to have a backup quarterback who's ready to go. And so the Buckeyes, I think, have been intentional about making sure Lincoln has been getting reps so that if he is forced to be out there for one play like Devin Brown was at Michigan State a year ago, or 20 plays like Devin Brown should have been out there against Michigan a year ago, that you have somebody who's a little bit more ready. But again, Ryan Day, I think, will take the bullets and say, it was me, it was my plan. I don't think it was his plan going into the game. I think it just changed. And maybe he took over at middle point of the second quarter, but I don't know. I think some of it is because a good leader says, it's on me. What's the old adage? If you win the game, it's because of your players. If you lose the game, it's because of your coaches, right? Yep. So if Ryan Day is doing the right thing by taking that blame.
Yeah, I think especially if you look at it in relation to the defense did exactly what it needed to do in that game. So, Ryan Day's not he could have taken some credit for that if he wants, but he delegated that to the head coach of the defense at the time, quote unquote, with Jim Knowles. Like they did the job. Now, when we talked to Ryan Day after the national championship and had that lengthy conversation, he was still talking about the missed field goals. And,
he brought it up on Tuesday.
It's still in his mind. I think, yes, the offensive game plan was porous. Nobody is ever changing that, and we can assign anyone is welcome to assign the blame wherever they want. Ryan Day, Chip Kelly, don't think that the wide receivers really did anything wrong in that, so I'm not sure that Brian Hartline is included in that conversation. But the truth is, it doesn't matter. The guy at the top lost the game, and he was, whether he deserved to take every single bullet or not, he did.
Yeah.
That's why he's paid at the level that he is. That's also why he gets so much praise and credit for the way that he responded in those 4 games in the playoff after that. What he learned, what he didn't learn, if the approach is going to be different on Saturday,
TBD.
We're going to find out. I mean, he said that you're the sum of your experiences, and he has another set of scars on his body and his brain to go try and eradicate on Saturday. We got one more we can do. Kevin wants to know about all the talk about the team not being tested isn't wrong. The weather conditions and crowd noise in the big house against a top 20 team will be the most contentious the Buckeyes have faced this year. Do you think the crowd or weather will play a major role on overall execution or the final score? Do either of those things concern you?
I mean, the weather concerns me, but that's because I'm a freak. And also, I think that obviously it can change your offense if it gets bad enough. This point, as we record this on Wednesday afternoon about 3:15, like the forecast doesn't seem like it's going to affect the entire game. Maybe towards the end, we'll see.
Did you just check it like 5 minutes ago?
No, but I just want, we need to be alert. Certainly, the crowd, it is what it is. Like, that's football.
Washington was really loud.
Pretty loud, yeah. So, I mean, it's not like they haven't played in a loud environment. Now, Washington, they lost their voice early, but it was pretty loud through that first half. So, yeah, I mean, it'd be silly to not suggest that those things matter. That's why home field advantage counts for points in Vegas. Like, it does matter. So, I personally take umbrage at the notion that this team hasn't been tested just because they haven't been tested like in a game this year. As I've talked about before, every one of these players has gone through their own personal trials and tribulations to get here. Every one of them, with the exception of the few guys that transferred in that are playing or the freshmen that are contributing, all have the scars from this game a year ago, and many of these guys have scars from this game for the last 3 years. So I don't think it's a situation where you're going to be like, oh, well, they've not faced any adversity. They faced a lot of adversity.
Yeah.
And they know what this game means. So, again, you hope that you don't go into it and put too much pressure on yourself, because that's when you make the mistakes that Kyle McCord was hoping that people wouldn't, by that extra pressure of like, oh, well, it's Michigan. We have to do this. We have to do this. Just play your football game, and you're a better team, and you should win.
Yeah. I don't think the weather's going to impact my thoughts or score on this game in any way. In fact, I've said it before and I'll say it again. If it's bad, not only does it affect both teams, but I think it would be more difficult for Michigan to account for that this year, the way that they're built. I don't think that their offensive line is as good as it's been in years past. I don't think that their defensive line is nearly as dominant as the one that Ohio State faced a year ago.
And the thing that really slows down are pass rushers and edge rushers, and that's where they excel.
And Bryce Underwood, if he now becomes an even more limited version while dealing with Matt Patricia's defense and the aliens at his disposal, I think that's more problematic for them. Yes, the road environment is difficult. The tunnel is its own challenge, as you mentioned. The noise in the big house, I never feel like it is that deafening. Maybe one time I've been amazed by the atmosphere, but that was when they were finally realizing 4 years ago that the streak was over, and they couldn't believe it, and they were celebrating wildly in the fourth quarter. But during games, and I don't mean this as an insult, and it is not rivalry trash talk. I don't feel like it holds the sound that well. Some of the same criticism that people level at the Horseshoe. I think the big house is worse when it comes to in-game atmosphere. You deal with the tunnel, you deal with the people yelling at you. That's on a different level than Washington. There were no Huskies fans that wanted to spit or throw batteries or dump bodily fluids on the Buckeyes as they walked on the field. That's going to happen on Saturday, and no one is ever prepared for that. Yeah. How can you handle it, though? That's the best Buckeye teams have been able to do that.
Yeah, and 21 up there was pretty loud. 23 was not bad once they realized that they were going to win the game. But I've been there in 13, 15, 17, 19. It was like, this is not a big deal. For you guys up in the press box is a little bit further away from the crowd than it is in most places. So I will say that they've done a good job getting sound up there. And I know Sharon Moore is pleading with the Michigan faithful to be as loud as they've ever been this week. And they will certainly come out of the gate that way. Like, this game is for a Big Ten championship berth. It's for a playoff berth for Michigan. It is to spoil Ohio State's season again. There's a lot on the line for them as it is for Ohio State. And so I think one of the advantages here is that both teams have something to play for. And that's been the case the last couple times they've been in Ann Arbor, but there's, you don't have Aiden Hutchinson and Connor Stallions and all the other stuff.
I was going to wrap it up, but you mentioned where the press box is. And so, Stephen, I just saw this. Where does Michigan Stadium rank among Big Ten stadiums as most accommodating venues to cover games for the press? It is the absolute... it's the worst. It's the absolute worst. I hate it. It is, from the moment you try and get into Ann Arbor, it's as if they've never heard of traffic patterns. They haven't been hosting games there for 125 years. They don't have any idea what to do. We have paid $90 to park at the high school. So, yeah, I know you're saying, that's a press box snob to say you're complaining about parking for a game that you're covering. Well, nobody else is doing it.
We're not required to pay for parking passes anywhere else when covering the game.
So that's unusual for them. Then we're going to deal with that walk. Refuse to open the press box early. You must get there they will not let you upstairs or pick up your credential or beautiful vest that you get to wear instead.
Until stand out there for an hour
until 9 a.m. in the cold. So if you want to beat the traffic because they don't know what they're doing, then you just get the reward of standing outside for an hour with fans in maize and blue all eyeballing you and threatening you, even if you're just there to cover the game, and to try and report on what you see.
It's hard to, from my perspective, it's hard to get warm pregame and deal with the cold because we have to stand outside for 45 minutes to get into the building ahead of time, which again, whatever, boo-hoo us, but it's not a complaint about our job. It's this specific place does not seem to really care that much about accommodating anybody who's in there, let alone the media who are there to promote this beautiful sport we get to cover.
That was only pregame. That's only the 3 hours leading up to it. So when we get there...
Also, if you're a fan of cheering in the press box, have we got a stadium for you?
It is the loudest press... So what I said about the big house itself doesn't necessarily apply to the press box, which is the loudest that you're ever going to find in the Big Ten for sure. When it comes to pregame keys and any sort of conversation before the game, I can't do that. They don't allow press box people. I guess that's what we are to be on the field. Down to the field.
So there won't be that on Saturday.
There will be pregame keys, but
we'll do it out.
But it won't be any from the field.
Maybe we can just do it in the car on the ride up.
Now, I guess they may be justified in keeping we're not going to do that, some of those people off the sideline because one of them once attacked JT Barrett, and they still have never found the assailant.
That's crazy.
Then you have the tunnel. Then you have dealing with that madness after the game, which you have to go into the tunnel to try and get to the tiny closet where they have visiting media, try and do press conferences. So you're in the midst of some dicey situations.
2 years ago, I couldn't make it to postgame because the crowd was on the field and the police officers there blocked the entrance to the tunnel so that the media who was on the field couldn't get off the field. So instead of getting off the field and protecting myself and my tens of thousands of dollars worth of camera equipment, I had to stand on a field with 105,000 people who were basically ripping and clawing at everything they could find in order to find a way to take something home with them. So that also wasn't good. And those cops were kind of jerks because they wouldn't let people go through, but that's irrelevant. It's fine.
It's not fine.
Bottom line, we don't like this trip, okay? And even though it's close.
It is still a blessing to cover the greatest rivalry
on
in sports.
Thanksgiving weekend, and especially. So we are so grateful.
And we're thankful for all of you for watching, listening, supporting this show and every other one that we've been able to do. Thanks to the fine folks at 97.1 The Fan, 10 TV. We hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving. We still have one more show to go for you this week. It will be Freaky Friday. It will be... Are they going to be bold, or are they just going to be predictions?
I don't know. It's going to probably be bold, if I had to guess.
Okay. Well, we'll cook them up. And we hope you have a wonderful day with your friends, family, loved ones. Celebrate any way that you can and see fit. One more version of the beat, and then it is time for the game. Thanks for joining us. Happy Thanksgiving. He's Birm. I'm Austin. We'll talk to you tomorrow.